like, well, if you take away that power, what's to make certain that you'll get it back from the larger government? And nobody thinks about that because they think we're all in a time of caring and pulling together, but maybe pulling together is centralizing governmental authority far more than what people are calculating.
I think you've hit on it right there. This is a decentralizing virus. It's changing itself. It's spreading across the globe into many different geographic niches, and you cannot kill that thing by centralizing human decision making. You have to decentralize human decision making so each locale can adapt to this differently. The virus that's floating around in China is not the same as the one that's right now in Sweden, nor is it the same one that's necessarily in other geographic zones because they've mutated, and the population they've entered is different. Okay, so there's papers now showing that the polymorphisms in the ACE2 gene, this is the gene that the virus enters into the cell, right? Well, there are variants in those genes, and some, granted, this is early, it's preprint data, but the preliminary data on this shows that there are certain mutations in the human population that are going to make the virus bind more effectively, and other ones that are going to block it. So I already know there's a spectrum of human polymorphisms that are going to react differently to any given viral strain. And on top of that, we have a matrix of different strains that have different variants that are circulating. So another paper came out yesterday suggesting there are variants in the HLA region of the human genome. This is a region that's involved in an immune response. That certain HLA genotypes are actually more susceptible to COVID fatality. So as this thing is moving from New York to Kentucky, to deploy the same centralized plan in both of those places, that's the virus. That's the biggest danger we face, is that we take a one-size-fits-all approach and roll that out into the marketplace. So I think when these people are saying we need to centralize, we need one guy in charge, they're not recognizing that the right thing to do in a pandemic isn't to choke the economy and have one guy run it. I mean, look, last night he's talking about disinfectants in your blood, right? That's not the answer. The answer is to stimulate the economy, rip all the regulations off of it, turbocharge the economy, let everyone go to town on this thing, and we'll have drugs and solutions far faster than we will if we let everybody sit around and wait for one guy to push each option through the FDA. That's not going to solve this. It's different in every jurisdiction. Every local environmental condition in every hospital has different demographics, different viral loads, different viruses, and different genetic populations they're dealing with. And what they find works in Alaska is likely to be very different than what they find working in Miami. And to centrally control this and govern this is actually the biggest virus we have going around.
Do you think that the destruction, the hospitals being overrun in New York was a result of them being over-prepared? Or are you saying, no, I believe that they had many, many more people in the emergency room than normal, but that the containment of it was always going to be at this level?
Well, you've got to back up and say, why didn't they have enough beds? Right? There's certificate of need law that in order for a hospital to build out beds in New York, they have to get their competitor hospital to approve it. That's why there aren't enough beds. That's the problem of centralized planning. You've got a government who put regulations in place that have certificate of need laws. Get rid of those. Those don't make any sense.
I've never heard of that.
So if the hospital, the healthcare industry, the reason there aren't masks in a first world country has nothing to do with their inability to make masks. It has to do with the fact that we've got regulations that make it economically unwise to make them in the United States due to labor laws and perhaps maybe environmental laws. So they all got pushed overseas. But we know how to make paper masks. The country could do it, but they need to go through the FDA. A mask needs to go through the FDA, right? And at one point when they realized that the FDA was in the way, they told people to wear bandanas. I mean, this is not being spoken about, but it's because of the FDA that we have them micromanaging whether a mask is safe or not, that we don't have enough masks. And then getting Trump involved, saying, I'm going to make all the masks and then bid against the local politicians to own all the masks and then give them back to them in some kind of political gestures is just all show. The real root of the problem here is that why do we have the FDA regulating 25 cents of every dollar ever spent? They're unelected. Right? They pay no price when they're wrong. And if you look at the revenue streams from the FDA, 2/3 of the revenue coming from the FDA are from the PDUFA Act of 92. PDUFA Act of 92 means that the FDA is paid by the people they regulate. The pharmaceutical industry is who's paying the FDA. That's where most of the money comes from. All right. So how are they an adequate regulatory agency when most of their revenue is coming from the people they're supposed to be the watchdog for? All right. This isn't a regulatory system. This is a bribery system veiled as a regulatory system that enables large entities that can afford the process to get through, and they all swap like a revolving door between the different boards, from Pfizer's board into the FDA to Monsanto's board into the FDA. This isn't what America thinks it is. This is a highly sophisticated wealth redistribution system that's going on. And that's why we don't have masks. That's why we don't have beds. So if you get rid of those centralized plans, the economy will work. But what's happening is people are saying, the sky's falling. We need more central plans. And it gets worse. So I don't. That's my 2 cents on it. Is that this is an artifact of choking an economy, not unleashing it.
I mean, of the 30 some odd guests that I've had, no one has said anything to me as dangerous as the thing that you just said there. Like, I'm all the way to the point of being uncomfortable for the first time on my own show. But I know, like, regulatory capture is a real thing. People don't realize that that in my example, I used to work at Monsanto, and the people that were protesting against Monsanto that stood outside and held up posters, they weren't paid for by Monsanto. But if Monsanto could have paid for them, they would have paid for double of them. Why? Because the protesters made them go out and make everybody afraid of genetic engineering and what you can be spraying out there. And so they would go to the government and they'd say, you know what, you're right. People are afraid. Go ahead and give us a few more years of regulation and we'll prove that it's safe. By the way, each additional year that you stack on is $10 more million in regulatory burdens. Yes. So if a little company wants to come in and compete, they now have to get through 13 years of regulatory trials at $10 million a year. There's no chance. It's a giant moat built around it. And it makes it so we have a very choked out biotech system.